So Saul, Mr. Mr. Expert on the faith, has turned. He has become as a little child. He has had to let go of all that he thought he was new and sure about. There are people in this room who know that story too. And then we come to a great little vignette, verse 10, chapter 9. Now, there was a disciple in Damascus named Ananias. The Lord said to him in a vision, "Ananias?" He answered, "Here I am." Again, echoes back to Isaiah. "Here I am, Lord." He only has to call Ananias once. The Lord said to him, "Get up, go to a street called Straight, and at the house of Judas, look for a man of Tarsus named Saul." At this moment he's praying. He's seen a vision. A man named Ananias come in and lay his hands on him that he might regain his sight. And Ananias responds, Lord, did you say this man's name was Saul? This is not the same Saul that we've been hearing about that's been killing my friends and relatives in the way. They say it's not that same Saul, is it? Because Lord, and then the voice says, "Go!" So we've got one called story, Saul, followed by another called story, Ananias. And Ananias goes, and he addresses church enemy number one, a religious terrorist, a murderer, as brother. He says, "Brother Saul, I actually did not want to be here myself with someone like you, but I was forced. So let me lay hands on you." And here this little Ananias lays hands on Saul. He receives his sight. He is cured. You know, you've seen this happen before in the Gospel of Luke with Jesus. Surprise, now ordinary people get to heal other people. And he is restored. He gets up, takes food for the first time in 3 days. 3 days. Jesus was in the tomb 3 days. Is this an Easter story? Yeah. So, and thus the great missionary to the Gentiles is born. The voice says to Ananias something interesting when he commands him. It says, he's seen a vision. "Go," the voice says to Ananias, "for Saul is an instrument, a tool, whom I have chosen to bring my name before Gentiles and kings and before the people of Israel. And I myself will show him how much he must suffer for the sake of my name." Which is curious, because a lot of times in sermons, I kind of imply, hey, things not going well in your life? In pain of some kind? Suffering? Well, come to Jesus. He'll fix that. He's against suffering. He will make you suffer less. He has compassion on your suffering. No, the risen Christ says to Ananias, this guy Saul, he thinks he's been in pain. He doesn't know pain. Wait till he meets me and works for me, buddy. I'm going to show him how much he's going to suffer for me. I'm going to show him some real, honest to God suffering. He thinks that his hip replacement was painful. You wait till I get through with him. Wow. And notice, if Saul is converted, if he is called, it's not for him to have a more purpose-driven life. It's because Jesus has got a job to do. Okay, I got an errand for him to do. It'll be the hardest thing he's ever done in his whole miserable little religious terrorist life. Wow. But it's like Jesus can't get in, the risen Christ can't get any of that going without Ananias. Who is the most remarkable kind of conversion in this story? Is it Saul? Or is it Ananias, who moves from saying, this enemy, Saul, brother, Saul. And he goes through such a remarkable change, he changes his name. You still see this in our rites of baptism when we say, what name will be laid on this child, on this person? Wow. I'm saying it's a call story. Now, listening to this, what are implications? I was going to tell you what I thought the implications of this story was, and then I thought, I'm not from Canada. What do I know, And if I say to them, here are the implications, they're going to say, you're not from Canada. What do you know? And I came over the border last night, asked me the most obvious question, are you armed? Are you coming in here to kill somebody? Because you're from the States. And, that's when Jeff said, really, he is a Southerner, but weirdly, he's not armed. He's not. Anyway, just kind of call out some of the implications you hear in this for you, your church, your ministry, your discipleship. Because I think that's why Luke is telling us this story. Great, the first unknown person's first witness. Surely you're meant to think about the first witnesses. Who were the first witnesses? Very first, Gospel of Luke. The women go out to the tomb on Easter morning. The men, where the heck were the men? Well, they were back there hunkered down behind locked doors and saying, why don't you women going out to the cemetery? It's still dark. And the Romans who had this orgy of killing this weekend, I'm sure you'll be fine. Take the flowers out there to the tomb and pay our last respects for poor dead Jesus. And then they get out to the tomb, and this angel says, looking for Jesus? Sorry, just missed him. He's not here. And then the angel says to them, he is risen. You will now live forever. You'll get to see your loved ones when you die. No, the angel says, it sounds like the same voice. Go, tell. And I hear people in grief who've had a trauma. They get an order, these women, and they are the first witnesses. N.T. Wright, great biblical scholar, makes a big deal out of the fact that women were not allowed to give testimony in a court of law. Their testimony was unreliable. It was suspect. You could testify, but only through your husband. Isn't it weird? Luke has the first witnesses to the resurrection are only women. And N.T. Wright goes on to say, that's on my list of reasons why I believe the resurrection really happened. Because if the church could have weaseled out of having those women, having our faith be dependent on the testimony of those women, we would have done it. If there was any way we could have denied that and cleaned that up, we would have. Ananias, in fact, I relate more to Ananias than I do Saul. I have not had the blinding, dramatic conversion. I have had situations, though, where the risen Christ said to me, go to Aner, South Carolina. I got a job for you to do. And you say, Lord, I don't like that part of the state. I have met people from there, and they're not nice. So, okay, thank you. Others? Other insights? Ooh, I thought you were going to go with Paul, but you're going with Ananias? Yeah, good. And you know, what is it, what effect does it have on us as Christians to know that our great heroes were wrong on a number of things? They had to get revelation. The heavens had to open, a light had to shine, a voice had to speak, and they had to say, whoops, I guess I've got to revise my view of the world on the basis of what I've received here. That's a beautiful point, and I really hadn't thought about that, probably because I'm a professor and don't like to admit that I'm wrong on things. But it is, I'm from South Carolina. Does that mean anything to you? Okay, well, it just means we were like wrong on a number of important things. And, you know, over the years I've thought it's almost a gift. I remember when somebody said to me during the Vietnam War, our country's never lost a war. We can't admit defeat. That would be horrible. And I said, well, we lost a war, and our cities got burned down to the ground, and we developed a whole theology for that, for how you can be arrogant and defeated at the same time. And so it can be done. But I love that kind of thing about, this would suggest to me that if I get into an argument with you about, now what's the truth and what's true, I got to remember, you know, I'm not God, and I could get it wrong, and I've got to be open to further revelation and voices. And, wow, nice, yeah. Yes? Yeah. 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 Yeah, to be part of the story, to be a disciple means to be vulnerable to the call, to, hey, I'm already a Christian. Well, in effect, oh, but you're going to discover that means so much more than you first thought. And that's wonderful. You're a preacher, but you know it's great when people come out of the church and they, as they have sometimes said to me, oh, gee, well, I've never heard anything like that. I mean, what am I going to do with that? I mean, how am I going to work next week? You know, if that's true, I mean, what am I going to do? And this is just this is too idealistic. This is unrealistic. You know, this is too hard. And I always say, you know, hey, I didn't ask you to be baptized. You know, if I were choosing a group of people to be a church, I wouldn't have chosen you. And but for some reason, the risen Christ actually thinks you can be a disciple. Now, I look at you and I find you just as weak and deceitful as I am. But, wow. And it is, it does mean, to be a Christian means to try to stay constantly open to this experience of me. Did you say me? You know, I'm not good speaking on my feet. Me? Well, that's, and it can be kind of the fun. I remember the woman coming out of church one Sunday morning and she said, I've had a hellish week. And I said, oh, I'm sorry, I hadn't heard. So yeah. And said, I've just, I came here this morning for some comfort and some consolation. And I said, oh, well, I hope you got that during the service. And she said, not particularly. She said, what I did get, though, that I didn't deserve was an assignment. And she walked out. And I thought, wow. Well, first thing I thought is, you're a good preacher. But, you know, But I also thought, there are people in this room that can identify with that. You're just minding your own business. You're just here out of habit. You just want to hear some music or something. And next thing, and you walk out with an assignment that you didn't ask for, that you didn't need to make your life more fulfilled. Well, hey, that's the story. And I love that. Occasionally you'll see a Christian interview show or something. Well, tell me what happened when Jesus came into your life. Well, I had a drinking problem, and I had been through 2 failed marriages, and had gained 300 pounds, and then I found Jesus. And now I own a multi-million-dollar cosmetics business and have a Winnebago, and it's just great. Well, wow, I love that thing about, hey, I don't give a rip whether this pleases you or not. I got a job for you to do. And, since you're already a murderer out of habit, I think you'll be wonderful to go talk to the government in my behalf, because you'll have something in common with those politicians, and we can, I can't use any sweet little preachers up there. I got to have me a murderer up there, that they can relate to. And wow. Yes. The what? Scare test. Yeah. I don't know that I ever heard that phrase, scare test, but I like that about it. Like somebody saying, I can't decide if this is really God speaking to me or not. You as a pastor can say, are you terrified by this? Are you thinking I am completely inadequate? Are you thinking, oh, God's made a mistake and called the wrong person? Sounds like it's God to me, if you can it meet these criteria? Alas, as a pastor, my experience has been, people often come to me as a pastor and they said, I am in the worst dilemma. I don't know which way to turn. I don't know what to do. And I thought it'd be so good to think about it with my pastor. And I said, oh, good, if you've come to the right place. Well, I think you and your wife need to sit down and have a truthful conversation. Oh, she could never take that. No, she would. No, it's just blow her away. And I said, okay. Well, have you thought about talking to like a third party who has a lot of experience in marital stress? Hey, I'm not crazy, and those people charge a lot of money, and I can't do that. I said, okay. Have you thought about the possibility of maybe that you need a change in your life or a change in your career? And I said, no, where can I make this kind of money? And what other job? And well, we get to the end of the thing, and I said, and I realized basically the person has come to me and say, I want some way of being faithful to Jesus that will never cost me anything or that I couldn't possibly get hurt by. And they walk out saying, our preacher is not as smart as I thought our preacher was, because he hadn't been able to come up with one good idea. I like your test, the scare test. Yeah. Yes. I'm trying to keep this thing as much focused on the laity as I can. But fine, all right, fellow clergy colleague. Yeah, absolutely. And, as a Christian, it is such a weird ethic, a way of life of, it's not good enough to say I could get hurt doing this. And I remember after a stormy board meeting, and I was sitting in my office the next morning thinking, oh, what did I do wrong? And Oh, you push too hard sometimes. Sometimes you overstate things. You're a preacher. You kind of overstate things. And you should have waited longer. You've only been here a year. This kind of thing, you should have laid your groundwork. Don't ever ask the laity to vote on anything in a meeting that you don't know how they're going to vote. You should have counted the votes before you got in there. You know. And then I turned from that, looking at the gospel lesson for the next Sunday. And I forgot what specific text it was, but it was kind of a typical text of Jesus says something, and then we say something, and then he says something, and then we say, let's kill him. And it was like a voice spoke to me and said, hey, now what about cross do you not get? Was I not up front? No false advertising. Hey, I'm going to a cross, and there's also a cross for you too that just fits you just fine. And in fact, you have to take it up every day. You haven't taken up a cross in the last 8 days? Huh. Well, I questioned your fidelity. So the scare test, that's nice. Other insights? Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh, interesting. Nice, yeah. He also makes a big deal in some of his letters that what I'm talking about was not revealed to me by flesh and blood. I got this straight from the Lord. I mean, he appeared to me. And now it says that he spent a number of days afterwards, presumably being taught and all instructed, but that phrase, this isn't just a light that shines. Acts says it's a light from heaven. And so I'm thinking that you're stressing he's isolated from everybody else. We call that seminary, actually. And because of the kind of people we're dealing with, it takes them 3 years. They can't do it just for a few days. And yeah, that's nice. And I wonder from a First Nations perspective, as you put it, I mean, imagine being told as a Jew that a Jew who has, with your people, been chosen and has suffered down through the centuries for your chosenness at the hands of these Gentiles. Imagine being told by God, you're my instrument, he is my instrument. He's going to take my name to kings. Well, there aren't any kings except kings oppressing Jews. And to the Gentiles. And then third, and to the people of Israel. I mean, imagine what that meant. And by the way, not to give away the plot, but who is the first Gentile convert in Acts? It's this Cornelius. Who was Cornelius? He was the SS Obermeister in Jerusalem, the head of the occupation forces. And I just have to laugh when I think about that. I mean, you think, hey, Luke, the great, great, great parent of us all here, we Gentiles, it would have been nice if it could be a nice person. She wasn't Jewish, but she wanted to be Jewish, and she studied Jewish books and things. Let it be that person, not this in your face. And you just see, here's a gospel that is not content to hang around nice people. The great missionary to the Gentiles is not an earnest seeker after wisdom named Saul. It is a horrible murderer named Saul. That's that's who we got the word from. Whoa. Yes?
It strikes me that in terms of a Paul story, Saul isn't even given the opportunity to respond initially. He plays a very passive role.
Yeah.
Where Ananias has the opportunity to both respond and to dialogue.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to compare those two situations, but I'm also wondering
Huh.
how many other people were asked before Ananias said yes.
Oh, spoken like a pastor. Yeah. Yeah. It's fascinating. Aaron used the phrase, I think, jerked around, or I have students read through the Acts of the Apostles in tandem in my local church and mission class. And they always note that Luke wants to be darn sure that there's no action going on in your heart. There's no interesting action going on in us. The action is always outside us, and the image I get in Acts is the first church being dragged, kicking and screaming all over Asia Minor. None of this stuff is our idea. Philip had no need to go into the desert at noon and there to meet an Ethiopian eunuch. No, I don't know how I got here, and I don't know. And what another wonderful conversion story, kind of like, the Ethiopian has him explain the scroll to him, and the Ethiopian says, well, what's to hinder me from being baptized, to becoming a Christian? And Philip says, well, we got this requirement called baptism, and nothing would please me more than to baptize an Ethiopian eunuch. But we got to have water, and there's no water out here. And the Ethiopian says, hey, here's a spring right here in the middle of the desert. How about that? And Philip said, oh, Lord, they're going to kill me back in Jerusalem. They were mad about my baptizing those Samaritans. They are going to be furious about this. And it's now what do we learn from that? I think a lot of my sermons are anthropologically driven rather than theologically driven. A lot of my sermons are, hey, gang, here's some principles you need to follow, that you can get yourself together, and you can get your life in gear, and you can be more faithful, and you won't need Jesus dying on a cross to save you, because I have been delivered these great principles for action, and you can follow them, and you can save yourself. Well, that's blasphemy, and which would make me ask, I wonder what initiatives are going on in your life, what initiatives going on in your church that can only be adequately explained as movements of the Holy Spirit, as this enlisting, commanding, ordering God. Now before you say, oh, I can't think of anything, or remember, we have spent centuries training you to believe this is operative in your life are self-derived. They come out of you rather than to you. That there is nothing going on here that isn't initiant. I think Luke is luring us into a world in which we're shocked. I remember the Lutheran pastor in Philadelphia who told me that she said, when I got out of the Lutheran seminary in Philadelphia, all Willimon and demythologized up and ready to go, serving a Lutheran inner city church in Philadelphia, I said, I was surprised at these young adults showing up. Usually a hard crowd to reach in the church. And she said, so I met with them and I said, how can I be helpful to you in your spiritual journeys? And they said, we want Bible study. And we want you to do it. And we don't want much discussion. We want you to tell us what you know. Hand it over. Oh, wow. And she said, all of them were either poorly churched or unchurched. And so said, oh, I thought Acts of the Apostles. I'll do Acts. Yeah, yeah. So she said, I began the first Bible study in an apartment with these young adults, Philadelphia. And she said, I was just offensive as I could be. I said, now, people, in the Acts of the Apostles, there will be some miraculous healings and deliverances. There will be angels. Now, we're not going to get hung up on that because that is a primitive first century way of expressing a deeper spiritual reality. And she said, to show you how little I knew about these young adults, by about the third week of the Bible study in Acts, I had to say, look, if you have seen Jesus on the highway, if you have had a friend miraculously healed before your very eyes, if you have seen an angel, keep it to yourself. We do not have any more time to go into that stuff, people. And she said, the irony is here I had been trained in seminary to serve these skeptical, standoffish, critical, modern people. By the time I got into ministry, there weren't any modern people left. There were all these postmodern people who say, wow, that is weird. That never has happened to me, but I wish it would. Do you know anybody that's ever happened to like that? Because that's some weird stuff. And I think in a very subtle way, Luke is messing with our brains here. And we are being asked to move and take up residence in a world that we don't get much preparation for.